Hello, I'm Robert, and then just one more. I done a long video about Avdiivka, and this is a shorter one, and I just want to remind you that Russia has lost an entire army, larger than the army of Netherlands or Portugal, and a third of the army of the United Kingdom, to take this tiny. It's about the size of Bognor Regis or Palm Springs, and you can see most of it there. Those are individual houses. Just to zoom in on it, and it's not a very big place, and they've lost an entire army in order to try to take it. That's it. That's it. You can see the individual houses there. Zoom in on part of it, and it's got one railway line going through it, but this railway line is not much use to Russia because it just goes as far as Avdiivka, and then it's off into the area of Ukraine that's still held by Ukraine. So, and the industry will have been just destroyed to rubble. This shows how this is open source information, and you can see more than 10 times as many tanks lost by Russia than were lost by Ukraine, and even more for the infantry armoured fighting vehicles. And it's likely that in losing those 47,000 soldiers, that Ukraine lost probably only about 4,000 or less. This shows how it's just a tiny pocket, filling in the pocket next to a big city of 2 million. And Ukraine was going nowhere with that pocket. They could easily have just left it. It would have made no difference. And that's why they just won a sandcastle with this. And this puts the bigger context, and in the longer video I talk in much more detail, but that's Avdiivka. It's a pointless pocket. This is where Ukraine is almost through the front lines, and it got through the minefields with a great deal of difficulty because the NATO equipment was not good enough to get through the very wide Russian front lines. But Putin, as he usually does, he sacked the general who made those front lines because he was too good. And so it's stuck in the mud. Ancient doctrine generals who are directing the war now, who Putin likes, and they should have sent all those 47,000, the entire army could easily have fortified Robertine, but instead they attacked Avdiivka and lost it, and lost the entire army. So Russia has not won, it's lost an army for a pointless objective, which it would have very much been very useful later this summer if Ukraine does a counteroffensive. So if Ukraine does a counteroffensive this summer and it goes through Robertine or wherever it does, then just remember, Russia could have had an army of 47,000 soldiers and 364 tanks to meet them, and it doesn't, because it lost them in this totally silly and pointless way, and it's very strategically dim. And this is just about how the Russians call it the Avdiivka triangle, like the Bermuda Triangle, because soldiers and tanks go into it and they don't come out. This is about how the White Angels, who go and rescue, White Angels is the name for a group of police, White Angels police, who go travelling through Avdiivka, house to house, trying to persuade people who live there to leave, because old people they tend to get rather used to where they live, and they don't want to move, and they just stay there even when there's bombs falling all around them. They just can't imagine going anywhere else, especially the very elderly. A lot of them become like that, and it takes a lot of persuading, and eventually they get persuaded to leave. So it was really, you could go and look, it's quite a nice city, it was, and they just sort of think, why is this happening to us? We haven't done anything. What's Russia doing? And they might be quite keen on Russia, but not on, obviously, their city being destroyed. And then I talked down here about the Ukraine they had a big victory in 2023, not just getting through the front line in Robertine and across the Dnieper River in 2 places, and all ready for counter-offensives. They also drove the Russian Black Sea Fleet out of Crimea. Russia lost the commander of the Black Sea Fleet when they destroyed the headquarters, and Crimea it's almost a no-go area for the Russian ships, and it's got very little protection now from the Ukrainian cruise missiles and ballistic missiles, and Ukraine has control of the grain corridor, and that is the situation as we come into 2024. So Ukraine is in a far stronger position at the start of 2024 than it was at the start of 2023. It's through the front line. Russia's not built a new front line. It's destroyed much of the air defences over Crimea. It's pushed the Black Sea Fleet to the far side of the Black Sea. It's cut through communications over large areas of occupied Ukraine. It destroys bridges. It's got far better equipment. Its Patriot air defences are now shooting down fighter jets, Russian fighter jets, over the Azov Sea. So they have some air control even over the Azov Sea now. They have a lot more of the European equipment, which they also have been using for a year now. So they've got the Leopard tanks, they've got the Challenger tanks, they're going to have the F-16 soon, so they have air support. They're building up an army of 1 million drones. They've got huge support from Europe. So even though the budget from the US, we don't know yet if it's going to come through. If that does come through, that would be a huge boost. If it doesn't come through, Ukraine, and it's built up its own defense industry. It's got defense contractors from Germany, from the United States, from around other parts of Europe. They are in Ukraine, working with Ukrainians and helping them to build NATO equipment in Ukraine. And then Ukrainians and defense industry is partnering with other industries, for instance, to build repair units outside Ukraine. And there are lots of supplies streaming into Ukraine all the time, which the media don't tell you about, because the media at the moment are just, for some reason, I think it's to do with trying to persuade the Republicans in the House. So just those 500, well, it's a few hundred Republicans in the House. I can't remember half the numbers, 200, so I forget the number. I think all this media is mainly about persuading those people to vote for the Ukraine bill and persuading Mike Johnson to bring it to the floor. And I think once that happens, I think suddenly the news will brighten up and they'll start saying that Ukraine's position is much, much better. But the things they're saying just don't make sense. They don't stand up to any scrutiny. The Ukraine is in a very strong position. Russia is in a very weak position. Winning Avdiivka is totally pointless. And there's no chance of Russia regaining Kherson city again or getting Kharkiv. So before the war started, I read the analysis by military analysts, and they said Kharkiv is the key to northeast Ukraine because it's the hub of many communication networks. And Russia has never taken Kharkiv, and Ukraine has liberated all of Kharkiv Oblast. And then Kherson, that was the key to travelling further towards Odessa, and Russia can't do that. Zaporizhia, but that would be if they were travelling up north, they'd have done that. They can't do that. They essentially, there's no way that no direction that Russia now has to try to attack central Ukraine, and they can't attack north to Kyiv again. That is very well defended now. Russia's no chance of doing that attack again. So it's just ridiculous, this idea that Russia is somehow going to take back the whole of Ukraine, and when it's spent 4 months to just travelling sometimes inches a day to take this tiny city the size of Bognor Regis or Palm Springs. So that's my short version. And so I expect, and then just a reminder that this is the winter, and if Russia was sensible, they would do what Ukraine is doing. They just hunker down, they'd fire missiles across the other side, some flying things, but it's the mud season. Tanks can sink up to the turrets in the mud, so they have to drive on the roads, which may be partly why they lose so much equipment, that they can't drive through woods and through fields. They just have to drive in the open roads. And it's extremely cold, and soldiers risk losing their fingers, their toes, their feet from frostbite. And they risk hypothermia, which is when people just stop trying to live when it gets very cold, and especially if it gets a bit wet and they're not eating very well, and then they just want to go to sleep. And sometimes they start thinking, oh well, it's very warm, and they take their clothes off when they're not actually warm, and then soon after that they die. And so another time they just go to sleep and never wake up. And a lot of Russian soldiers are doing that because it's appallingly bad conditions for fighting. And other Russian soldiers are losing their limbs and losing their feet or their toes or their fingers to frostbite. And that's happening right now. It's really sad. And they're not responsible for what they're doing. They just think of themselves as soldiers doing their job. They're not really, they don't have the larger picture that Putin has. So it's appropriate to feel quite a lot of compassion for the soldiers, and also appropriate to feel compassion for Putin, which I talk about in a longer video, just to think a little bit about it. Probably just, it's good, it certainly is good to avoid, to not get fixated on hating. That doesn't help anyone. Hating Putin is not going to do any good. It just harms yourself. And so just try thinking about all the kindness and good that's happening in the world, and then to think about Putin. It can help to think about, well, it's not going to happen. It's not realistically going to happen. But just suppose by a miracle that Putin was to wake up and think, what have I done with my life? This is awful. And he had a complete turnaround like that. And then he started feeling just much more positive about things, thinking, well, that was it's like a bad dream. I should never have done all that. What can I do to make the world a better place? Well, imagine Putin's a human being. He has the capability to think like that. He's blocking it off or whatever. He's not going that way. But it's very good for one's own peace of mind, I think, and for being very positive in help, especially when helping scared people as well, just to keep a positive frame of mind. Just think, this is something that Putin could do. And then just wish that he did do that he could come to this realization and to an understanding, what have I done with my life? And then move to a positive direction. And just wishing that for him, even though that's not going to change anything, but that's going to change something in your own mind, and that helps the world. So I say that at the end of the longer video too. My longer video, and my voice goes a little bit quiet towards the end, and so you might have to turn the sound up. But I've got a longer video about all this, and this is a shorter video to help. So hopefully this helps.